This is Samus Aran, a bounty hunter sent to this decrepit planet called Zebes to put an end to a group of space pirates who made off with a hazardous alien life form called Metroid. So the mission is simple: infiltrate their fortress on Zebes, take down their leader, and eliminate the Metroid. For context, we're in space in the year 20x5, but we go back earlier to the cosmic year 2000. All these civilizations across various planets have come together to form the Galactic Federation. Basically a cosmic peace project, trade routes, spaceships, the whole 9 yards. The galaxy's booming and everyone's happy, except for one little problem: space pirates. The Federation had to act quickly and form the Galactic Federation Police, but these pirates proved to be too much for them. So they resorted to Plan B: recruit the galaxy's greatest warriors to help, known as space hunters, who were paid handsomely to capture these pirates. This led to the creation of the lucrative profession of space bounty hunting. So we come back to the year 20x5. A research spaceship in deep space managed to get its hands on an unknown protoplasmic life form found on the destroyed planet SR-388. The life form is locked in suspended animation for now, but expose it to beta rays for 24 hours and boom, it multiplies like crazy. They name it Metroid, and with this life form being the prime suspect in wiping out planet SR-388's civilization, the researchers decide it's best to bring it back to Earth for further study. Well, good. It would be terrible if this thing fell into the wrong hands. So the space pirates take the Metroid, and after a desperate search, the Federation police find their headquarters on the planet Zebes. They tried to infiltrate on their own, but as usual, the pirates mopped the floor at them. So now time is of the essence. If the Metroid begins to multiply, it could mean the end of the galactic civilization as they know it. Enter Samus Aran, known across the galaxy as the greatest space hunter, armed with cutting-edge technology and a suit that has the ability to absorb enemy power. That brings us back to this moment where Samus lands on planet Zebes, ready to infiltrate and stop these pirates before the galaxy faces total destruction. This month we dive into all things Metroid, starting with the origins of the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter, Samus Aran. Welcome to Mentoktober. Samus debuted in August 1986 in the very first Metroid title, simply named Metroid. Developed for the NES, this was an action platformer that was genre-defining. Samus must search and destroy the high-ranking pirates of the group, Kraid and Ridley, while traversing the cavernous maze-like ecosystem of Zebes. Within the catacombs with these dangerous space pirates are also aggressive local flora and fauna, and with this being a solo mission, the danger here is apparent. Armed with only a short beam at the start of the game, Samus must seek out power items across Zebes, upgrades that provide stronger weaponry to take down these lethal alien life forms. And defeating these two will grant access to the main headquarters of the space pirates, called Torian. With the pathway open, Samus heads inside.
Oh shit, what is that?
We're too late. Metroids have flooded the headquarters, but luckily they're contained for now. Samus discovers they're vulnerable to ice, and by using the ice beam coupled with a few well-placed rockets, they can be destroyed. With this part of the extermination mission complete, Samus moves deeper into the heart of the fortress. It's time for the final showdown with the space pirates' leader, Mother Brain. A cybernetic brain entity that's one of the most annoying bosses I've ever had the pleasure of fighting. It's all of these damn turrets around it, and after blasting Mother Brain with like 1,000 rockets, it finally goes down, and a time bomb is set to destroy the base. So in this frantic finale of the game, Samus must escape. In the original game, it's not clear who set this bomb, but I'd like to think it was Samus who just wanted to burn the whole damn thing down. The escape is successful, and the mission is accomplished. Peace is finally restored to the galaxy. You gotta love this last message here, by the way. Pray for a true peace in space. Like the narrator doesn't fully believe peace is returned. But assuming the player has beat this game in under 5 hours, you get a special ending where Samus decides it's time to take this suit off and breathe in the fresh space air. Wait a minute. Samus is a woman? What do you mean your name's not Metroid? Oh my god, she's waving at me. Okay, I know this isn't a surprise to anyone, but this is still discussed as a pretty big twist in gaming. Back when there was no internet or social media to spoil it for you. Even in the original manual for the game, they called Samus a he all throughout. So this twist, pretty groundbreaking, right? But who decided on this? How did they make this choice? Let's go back in time to the 80s when Nintendo was flying high after the success of Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. This is where unsung Nintendo superstar Gunpei Yokoi comes in to assemble the Metroid squad. I think this guy deserves just as much credit as Shigeru Miyamoto for where Nintendo is today, since he was responsible for producing some of Nintendo's most iconic franchises like Donkey Kong, Wario Land, and Fire Emblem. Unfortunately, he would pass away in a tragic traffic accident in 1997, but his legacy still lives on in a lot of Nintendo products. The game was originally called Space Hunter, the job title of Samus referenced in the game manual. But then they coined Metroid by combining Metro Subway to Android. Popular Japanese studio Intelligent Systems, now known for series like Fire Emblem and Paper Mario, would also jump in to collaborate on this project. Satoru Okada and Masao Yamamoto stepped up to direct, with Okada previously directing titles like Wild Gunman and Duck Hunt. Yamamoto, on the other hand, was a brand new director, his only prior experience at Nintendo being in Game & Watch design. Surprisingly, this was a pretty young and experienced team tasked to make a game this ambitious. A game that focused on non-linear exploration and having the players traverse a map in multiple directions and retrace their steps for upgrades. While The Legend of Zelda accomplished this in its own way, Metroid was a different beast that implemented one singular map with depth. Much like Zelda, Metroid would also lean into the idea of having permanent upgrades, rewarding players who took the time to explore. And the concept of the game itself was heavily inspired by Ridley Scott's Alien, implementing the same desperate, claustrophobic, lonely, and horrific emotion from the film. It was developed for a Japanese exclusive peripheral for the Nintendo Entertainment System, or as it's known in Japan, the Famicom. The peripheral was called the Famicom Disk System, a piece of hardware that allowed the Famicom to use this floppy disk format to run games, giving developers a little boost of disk storage and improved sound. The disk system version of the game also supported save files, but of course, discs come with longer loading times, and every so often the player would have to flip the disc to side B as Samus explores Planet Zebes. One thing you may notice from footage of this version though is that it lags a lot less than the NES cartridge version of the game, which is my biggest pet peeve with the original Metroid. And going back to this title can feel very rough at times since it has not aged as well as, say, Super Mario Bros. I'll be honest, this game was a few years before my time, and while I'm sure some of you Metroid veterans have the lag baked into your bones, it's a little too frustrating for me at times. The idea for Samus, and by Samus I mean the original mysterious bounty hunter Samus, was conceived by the scenario designer Makoto Kano and designed by Hiroji Kiyotake. Originally, Samus was just a faceless bounty hunter meant to be a stand-in for the player. But then one day, someone on the team said, "Hey, wouldn't that be kind of cool if it turned out this person inside the suit was a woman?" It was a simple comment that ended up making gaming history, and oddly enough, no one can remember exactly who said it, even Sakamoto himself. It's almost like a time traveler dropped by, planted the idea, and then disappeared into the ether. How weird. Samus's design outside the suit was heavily inspired by Sigourney Weaver's portrayal of Ellen Ripley in Alien. However, later her look would evolve to resemble actress Kim Basinger.
It's Bass Singer.
Drawing inspiration from her roles in 9.5 Weeks and My Stepmother is an Alien. As for the name Samus, this came from her designer, Hiroji Kiyotake, who was a huge soccer fan, so he would take inspiration from all-star footballer Pelé's real name, Edson Arantes do Nascimento, tweaking it to create Samus Aran. And though his name is pronounced Arantes, the pronunciation of Samus's surname is confirmed to be Aran.
Samus Aran.
Kiyotake has said, quote, "In reference to that, I made her name sound like his. Nevertheless, personally, I thought Samus Aran would get changed. And that's how the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter came to be. But as Samus continued to evolve throughout the series, her backstory would get deeper, more complex, and well, let's just say it wasn't all smooth sailing. Jumping ahead a bit, in 2002, we saw a Metroid revival was happening after just over an 8-year wait since the previous title. 2 new titles launched, Metroid Prime for the GameCube and Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, each showcasing different points in Samus's life. We'll explore those games in future videos, but alongside these releases came a Metroid manga, diving into Samus's mysterious past, her life before she became a bounty hunter. During the early days of the Galactic Federation, there was a huge demand for a mineral known as a floralite, as it's crucial for space travel energy. One of the largest mining colonies for this material was Star Colony K2L, home to Samus and her parents, Rodney and Virginia Aran. Rodney was the chief of the colony, a man known for working tirelessly for the betterment of the galaxy. And at the same time, Samus is just a 3-year-old and portrayed as a curious, adventurous type who often wanders off to make friends with the local wildlife. And then one day the Chozo, a peaceful bird-like alien race, visits the colony, hoping to strike a deal with Rodney for a large amount of afluorotite. Leading the negotiations were 2 prominent Chozo, Grey Voice and an elder figure called Grandpa Bird, or Old Bird. Despite Samus's growing fondness for Old Bird, Rodney refuses their request, citing strict regulations from the Galactic Federation. So they end up peacefully leaving, but we get a panel that reveals they need the afluorotite to awaken the Metroid. Well, that's suspicious. And then things go horribly wrong. Shortly after the Chozo depart, we find space pirates led by Ridley were tailing them the whole time, and they descend upon the colony, drawn by the valuable afluorotite. The pirates spare no one, with Ridley ordering them to enjoy the slaughter. In a heart-wrenching encounter, young Samus innocently tries to befriend the monstrous Ridley, unaware that this moment will mark the beginning of their lifelong enmity. Her mother's desperate screams echo nearby, which serves as a distraction for Samus's escape. But as for her mother, Ridley has no mercy. And this first encounter at Ridley wasn't just a battle for survival. It marked the beginning of a deeply personal feud that would haunt Samus throughout her life. Meanwhile, Rodney tries to save the colony in a last-ditch effort, sacrificing himself to destroy the space pirates' cargo ship, but it's already too late. The colony has been destroyed. A short amount of time passes and the Chozo, intercepting a distress signal, return to find the ruins, thinking absolutely no one survived this, until they see a lone figure walking through the devastation. It's Samus. Feeling sympathy for her, Old Bird and Grey Voice bring her to their current home, Planet Zebes. Hey, that's the planet from the game! Their resources are scarce, and her survival on such a hostile planet seems very unlikely. And this is where the manga makes a significant revelation. The Chozo's computer interface that oversees the planet is none other than Mother Brain. Yeah, and the Chozo are seen to rely heavily on Mother Brain's guidance, who agrees Samus won't survive Zebes as she is now. So they decide on a radical solution. Infuse her with Chozo DNA, enhancing her body so she can adapt to the planet's harsh conditions. 11 years later, Samus has grown into a powerful warrior, training in her new power suit, Chozo technology that is exclusive to their race, which explains those mysterious statues from the original game that provide her with power-ups. A connection that wasn't established at that time, but now it makes perfect sense. And under Grey Voice's mentorship, she learns that although the Galactic Federation is thriving, evil forces lurk in the shadows, and she's warned that she must never allow herself to be second to anyone. This upbringing, shaped by the loss and guided by the wisdom of the Chozo, helps Samus become the stoic, self-reliant warrior we know today. And during this time, it's revealed that the Chozo are cultivating Metroids on planet SR-388 as part of a larger plan to keep another, even deadlier parasitic threat in check. And this will have greater implications later in the series. And as Samus matures, the Chozo's reliance on Mother Brain grows. Old Bird, seeing the decline of their species, urges Samus to leave and forge her own path. And she heeds this advice, joining the Galactic Federation Police, setting her on a course to become the legendary bounty hunter we see today. I find it interesting because this manga contains so much foundational lore for the Metroid series, yet it exists in a somewhat nebulous area regarding official canon. Nintendo hasn't officially confirmed that these are the exact events, but these moments from the manga and many other plot points have made their way into the game somehow, shaping Samus's backstory as we know it. Now, there's some overlap here between this manga and an early Nintendo Power comic that was published for Super Metroid, but we'll talk about that once we reach that game. With Samus's origin story now more fleshed out, Nintendo decided it was time to revisit her earliest adventure in a way that incorporated these new details. In 2004, Nintendo would remake the first Metroid game for the Game Boy Advance, entitled Metroid Zero Mission, detailing Samus's first solo mission as a bounty hunter on the planet Zebes. Zero Mission revitalizes the original plot, with the space pirates stealing the Metroid, aiming to weaponize it, and Samus is sent in to stop them. I think it's also important to note here that Metroid are considered so dangerous because they're difficult to kill, and when they latch onto organisms, they just drain them of their life energy. Hence why the space pirates want them as weapons. But Zero Mission may as well be a brand new game at that time, due to the graphics receiving a major overhaul, and the overall controls are vastly improved due to it being on more powerful hardware. So just like the original game, Samus will take on Kraid and Ridley, who have extreme makeovers, to open up the path to Mother Brain. And believe me, this fight is just as annoying as the original. After the self-destruction sequence at the very end, Samus escapes, but in a plot twist, she gets shot back down to the planet during her escape, destroying both her ship and power suit. So now stranded at the space pirate mothership with only her Zero suit, gameplay is completely turned on its head in this segment. Samus, equipped with a weak energy pistol, has to sneak around the ship, avoiding the pirates. And she makes her way to a region called Chozodia, where the Chozo statue awaits that puts her through a trial. Here we see flashbacks of her past, incorporating her backstory from the manga, briefly showing her alongside Old Bird. And after a short test here, she unlocks a brand new power suit, complete with all these destructive upgrades, which leads to the satisfying ending of the game where she destroys the pirates on her way out. During her escape, she faces the true final boss, Mecha Ridley, a robot I guess the pirates decided to build as a backup, but after beating him, like every other base Samus infiltrates, it self-destructs, ending her Zero mission once and for all. So after the events of Zero Mission, Samus's reputation as a legendary bounty hunter was firmly established, but while her battle against the space pirates was a victory, it turns out the threat of the Metroids was still a concern.
Hi, Game Boy! アメリカで人気抜群のアクションソフト、メトロイド2を紹介しよう。ゲームボーイソフト、メトロイド2。
Now, before Samus's story reached new heights in the 2000s, we need to take a step back for a moment. Back to the early 90s. This is Metroid 2: Return of Samus, developed for the Game Boy in November 1991. And while the technology was limited, this was the game that truly began expanding the lore of the Metroids themselves. The Galactic Federation felt it was a good idea to send another research ship back to SR-388 to make sure there were no more Metroids there, and surprise, they get an emergency notice from the research base shortly after. They lose contact and the ship is missing, so they send a rescue party, and that team also goes missing. And I'm not joking, this is straight from the manual. They send another special combat group from the Federation police, and they also go missing. So everyone starts freaking out about the Metroids now, so as usual, the Federation throw their hands up and call Samus. Her mission? Head to SR-388 and exterminate every single Metroid. The game even tracks your progress with a Metroid kill counter at the bottom of the screen. And I think there's some irony here considering her eventual backstory that would be depicted in that manga, but let's put a pin on that for a minute. Unlike its predecessor, Metroid 2 takes Samus on a more structured path, where each step forward means eliminating a set number of Metroids before you can unlock the next section of the planet. Despite the Game Boy's technical limitations, Metroid 2 manages to keep the vibe of isolation, trapping players in a really detailed world despite the minimalistic graphics and lack of color. Even the music manages to maintain that eerie, atmospheric tone despite the more blaring sound card on the Game Boy. On SR-388, there are more Chozo statues around as well, though at this point in the series their race and connection to Samus still weren't established. Regardless, there are new power-ups for Samus's suit, for example, introducing the Spider Ball, an ability that lets Samus cling to walls and ceilings, radically shifting how players explored the caverns of SR-388. This would go on to be featured in several other games in the Metroid series, expanding the ways in which Samus could navigate hostile environments. One interesting fact about this game is that since the Game Boy couldn't display colors to signify upgrades to the suit like in the first game, Metroid 2 had to introduce a new version of the Varia suit with a whole new design to visually represent Samus's enhanced armor, a version that would stick around for future titles. As Samus ventures deeper, she realizes that the Metroids she once knew were merely toddlers. The creatures evolve, transforming into terrifying new forms, from the Alpha and Gamma stages to the brutal Zeta and Omega Metroids. I think this was such a cool idea, and it gives this little game some more variety. Each step in their evolution is more lethal than the last, leading to the final confrontation at the end of the game with the Queen Metroid. And Queen Metroids are practically indestructible from the outside, requiring Samus to use her Morph Ball form to roll into the mouth and use several bombs to damage them from the inside. Or you can just fire a ton of rockets into its mouth. And after an intense battle, Samus is victorious and has saved the galaxy once again. But just when it seems like the mission is over, she discovers a lone Metroid egg. It hatches in front of her eyes, and the baby immediately imprints on her as its mother. So yeah, this is a little awkward. In a twist of fate, Samus spares this baby Metroid, taking it with her as she leaves SR-388. And they'll elaborate more on her perspective in the next game, but for now, it's a wholesome moment in a game about extermination. But there's also this interesting, if subtle, parallel between Samus's past and the baby Metroids. Just as Samus was the lone survivor of her colony and taken in by the Chozo, this baby Metroid, now alone, is spared by Samus, even though she just killed its true mother. But I don't know if this mirroring was intentional in the manga at all, but I thought this pretty interesting to point out. So we quickly fast forward to 2017. Metroid 2 would receive a full remake for the Nintendo 3DS under the title Metroid Samus Returns. This version revisits the planet SR-388, but brings along a modern overhaul with updated graphics, mechanics, and more fluid gameplay, and these really awesome melee counter animations that are so satisfying to land. Around this time, people were starving for anything Metroid, so seeing a more traditional title surface was very exciting for fans. Mercury Steam, a game studio in Spain known for Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, Mirror of Fate, that's a mouthful, would develop the title with Yoshio Sakamoto returning as the game's producer, and Takehiko Hosokawa and Jose Luis Marquez joining as directors. The plot remains the same, beginning with Samus's extermination mission on SR-388, leading all the way to her revamped encounter with the Queen Metroid. She escapes with the baby, but there is a twist this time. A half-mechanical Ridley appears, clearly damaged from their last scuffle. But Samus is a pro at this now and defeats him once again. But in the end scene, we see a Hornode who's trying to enjoy Ridley's remains before being ambushed by another vicious organism known as an X-parasite, a species of parasitic organism known for copying other creatures. It copies into a much more gruesome form of the Hornode, hinting at events that unfold further in this timeline. Additionally, players with a high completion rating unlock several images that shed more light on the Chozo race that once inhabited SR-388. These images reveal that the Chozo were struggling with the X-parasites and created the Metroids to combat them, a major plot point introduced in the 2002 manga. By attempting to control one dangerous life form to defeat another, they inadvertently created a new problem, and the Metroids eventually spun out of control, seemingly wiping out the Chozo civilization and leading to events of the first Metroid game. In one particular troubling image though, we see a Chozo leader betray another, killing him and seizing control of their army. This ominous reveal hints at deeper conflicts within the Chozo, setting up key events for 2021's Metroid Dread. However, the X-parasite and its implications are central to Metroid Fusion, and we'll dive deeper into those connections in a future video. So we return to Samus and her unexpected companion, the baby Metroid. And this bond wouldn't just serve as a narrative twist. It would become central to the emotional core of one of the greatest gaming experiences of all time.
これがメトロイド。まだ幼虫だ。しかしこのエネルギーは人類の役に立つかもしれん。
3 years after Metroid 2's release, Super Metroid was developed for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1994, one of the most critically acclaimed entries in the series. Super Metroid expanded on the series' formula and deepened the emotional stakes, and for the very first time, shifted the narrative to be told from Samus's perspective. But this intro, I just gotta play it. Mwah. This intro just immediately draws you in. It's just so effective at setting the tone here. We then cut to Samus recapping the events of Metroid and Metroid 2, revealing that she delivered the baby Metroid to the Galactic Research Station Ceres, so scientists could learn more about its energy-producing qualities. And the scientists believed that Metroid's power could be a source for good. But wait a second. Oh no, that can't be the lab we saw at the very beginning.
Yeah.
Samus tells us that she received a distress signal shortly after leaving the lab, and now, it's in the player's hands. She descends into the lab to investigate, the lab empty and dark until we reach the room introduced in the very beginning of the game. The bodies of the researchers on the floor and the Metroid that we once saw at the center of the lab is now missing. Samus proceeds further to find the Metroid on the ground in a capsule, but cloaked in the darkness, it's Ridley. But after a short introductory fight, he manages to escape with the Metroid. So as always, a self-destruct sequence initiates and Samus has to escape in less than a minute. And just in the nick of time, she gets out of the lab. So Samus tracks the space pirates back to Planet Zebes. And what a way to flex by going back to the same planet the first game is based on, just with this brand new coat of paint. This is more than a coat of paint. This is like building a mansion out of a shack. This is like building a mall out of a store. I don't know. Anyway, now the ball is in the player's court. This place can be fully explored at their own leisure, and the sound design here is fantastic. The gameplay style returns to the more non-linear format of the first game, with added areas on Zebes for Samus to explore. Much like before, Samus will need to hunt down power-ups to progressively access new areas, and to assist with this, for the very first time ever in a Metroid game, players now have a map.
Finally!
Samus will find special map rooms while exploring, which allows her to download map data for specific areas, giving a lay of the land and ideas of areas that have gone unexplored. It also shows these little dots on screen to indicate areas of interest. Also new to the series is Samus's ability to aim her shots diagonally, so now you can get pesky creatures lurking on the ceiling with a well-placed shot. And I haven't even mentioned all the new power-ups like the charge beam, the speed booster, the grappling beam, the gravity suit. It's ridiculous how much was added to this game. Makoto Kano and Yoshio Sakamoto began development for Super Metroid in 1991, shortly after Metroid 2 was released. They had to spend the entire first year learning how to develop a game for the new hardware, but with this huge upgrade in graphical power, they wanted to make something people could compare to a movie. That infectious title screen I showed you was Sakamoto's idea, with him creating a video on VHS to convey the creepy vibe he wanted for this scene. As they were building out such a large map, Sakamoto would go home and let his wife and children play, and then come back the next day with directions on what should be changed based on watching their gameplay. The team worked tirelessly up to the last minute, with Toru Osawa, the graphical programmer, saying, quote, "We were tense, couldn't sleep, couldn't go home, and couldn't even take a bath. It stank. The work never ceased. The next day, we had to do it again." And this workload is apparent in the amount of detail in this game. Samus, for instance, would get a bit of a makeover as well, but I would argue her look is somewhat close to how she looks in the Metroid 2 endings. But in her suit, her sprite is amazing. The contrast of colors between the red and yellow, the glowing visor. When she stands still, you can see her breathing, and other parts of the suit lights up at points in time. It's amazing. But I'd argue the biggest glow-ups in Super Metroid are Kraid and Ridley. These were their original designs in Metroid, and since the developers of this game were trying to raise the stakes and make it more cinematic, they went for much grittier appearances, and these would be the ones that stuck to this day. But it's not just them this time around. The Space Pirates have some new recruits like Phantoon and Dragon, but the local guardians of Zebes are also riled up, like Crocomire over here. Apparently this design went through a few changes, with the team initially having a much cuter design that they had to change so players didn't feel bad for killing him. But based on what I'm seeing in discussions, fans still feel bad for slaying Crocomire, knowing that he's not affiliated with the pirates and just doing his best to hold down the fort. And the way he goes out is just tragic. Jesus.
1 minute later.
Nah man, justice for Crocomire. In this title is where we get the first mention of the Chozo and other hints of lore that we'll see fleshed out in the Metroid manga, with the manual officially naming these statues Chozo statues. The ancient bird people of Zebes are immortalized in the form of several statues scattered across the planet. The manual also reveals for the first time that Metroids were life forms created by an ancient civilization, which would later be revealed as the Chozo. Interestingly enough, one of the earliest glimpses into Samus's backstory came from a 5-issue supplementary comic published in Nintendo Power magazine for Super Metroid back in 1994. While the comic adds some new characters and some inconsistent elements like Galactic Federation characters Chairman Keaton and Chief Hardy, many of these would eventually be incorporated into that Metroid manga series. But its most important contribution would be the introduction of Old Bird and the first mention of Samus's origin on Colony K2L. In this story, Old Bird actually explains how the colony was attacked by space pirates and how he took in an orphan Samus, gave her Chozo DNA to augment her abilities, and provided her with the power suit to become a protector of the galaxy. So I guess it's safe to say that this comic set a lot of this lore in stone. This is my very first Metroid video, but I'm not a stranger to this series, so while I'm familiar with the details of her origins, I'm actually surprised at how scattered and fragmented the details were in the very beginning. So Samus goes around killing the hostile local wildlife and the 4 space pirate commanders, and I'm sure they're dead and never coming back, which like before unlocks the way back to Turian. Well, technically this is a new Turian since Samus blew up the last one. And like the first game, once we enter Turian, we see Metroids have begun to replicate, so Samus must make sure to exterminate every single one before she can proceed. No man, there's a really massive one here and it seems unavoidable. It starts draining the hell out of Samus, bringing her to an inch of her life, but all of a sudden, it stops. And then it starts freaking out. and after a moment, it runs off. How strange. But we have a mission to complete, and Samus proceeds deeper into the headquarters. This room looks awful familiar.
Hi.
Ah, surprise, surprise, Mother Brain survived. Now, if you remember from the manga section earlier in the video, they reveal that Mother Brain was a Chozo creation, but her relation to the Chozo isn't established in Super Metroid. Most of this is only fleshed out in that manga, which explains that it outgrown its creators and aligned with space pirates to impose its version of order on the galaxy. So while this isn't spelled out in Super Metroid, these details retroactively add a lot of weight to this final encounter. So here we are. Mother Brain has been reconstructed, but Samus knows what to do this time. We just blast her with rockets and the job is done. That was simple. Oh, never mind. Well, it's a good thing we can shoot diagonally now. With Mother Brain becoming this abomination, Samus seems to have met her match, and it looks like it's all over. As Samus is about to fall, the Metroid from earlier swoops in to save her. It's the one she spared, the baby Metroid. And it's more than just a rescue, it's the final act of the bond that they shared. And just like that, in a moment of sacrifice, the baby is gone. Now supercharged and pissed off, Samus doesn't just fight back, she lights up Mother Brain, and this time, she makes sure that it's finally destroyed.
Wipe yourself off, man. You dead.
And now the time bomb is set, and I'm pretty damn sure Samus set that bomb this time around. This time, it's not just Torian going down, it's everything. And the player could just run all the way back, but along the way, there's a specific room where animals native to Zebes are stuck, and you have the option to blast the wall open so they can escape. This gives a subtle change to your ending that I'll show you in a second. But with everyone evacuated, Samus heads back to her ship and takes off into space once again as Planet Zebes is destroyed once and for all, leaving the space pirates to dust. And if you save the animals, very subtle difference in the ending. You'll see somehow they left on some ship in the way distance in the background, so blink and you'll miss it. Anyway, the mission is complete, and like the previous titles, depending on your clear time, the end screen will change. Hell yeah. So Super Metroid was meant to put an end to Samus's story, a bookend to all the plot points between Samus and her feud with Mother Brain. It's pretty interesting reading a quote on this from Sakamoto back in 1994. I think the series is basically finished. Metroids were destined to be exterminated in the first place, so I wanted to finish in the most beautiful form. But that was a lie, because little did we know, Samus wasn't done yet. Before her extermination mission in Metroid 2, Samus embarked on other adventures that took place before her final showdown with Mother Brain. However, fans would have to wait 8 long years before they got the chance to experience those stories. But in the meantime, many young gamers were introduced to Samus for the very first time in the N64 hit Super Smash Bros. In 1999, where a whole new generation was once again surprised to learn her true identity. And despite Super Metroid feeling like the conclusion of her saga, as Grey Voice once told Samus, she's a protector of the galaxy, and space pirates weren't the only threats lurking in the vast expanse of space.